So one of the things I've been wanting to do here on the MetaViews show is bring in correspondents, bring in some of our MetaViews members, bring in guests who can help animate these issues in a way that I'm not always able to. And so for today's guest, partly for the purposes of testing, but also because she happens to legitimately be kind of an expert in this area and have a lot to say, well, it's just so conveniently able to bring in Jeanette Herla, who is my partner, who, works the Academy of the Impossible with me and is a very active MetaViews member. So, Jeanette, we've got you up on screen right now. And as you've heard, I've given a little context in terms of the schools reopening. But, maybe you want to set the scene for us and give us a sense as to why this particular debate is so contentious.
Well, since we're on Twitch, I'm going to go with the video game metaphor. The irony is that we're in a moment where the bosses are getting bigger, and yet we've been playing this game so long and not encountering a lot of success, and we're tired, and we kind of are actually scaling down our efforts in some ways rather than rising to the occasion of a bigger boss battle. And I think you really see this with the school issue. As Jesse mentioned, a lot of parents are kind of done with having the kids at home. Distance learning has been really successful for some kids, and I think we need to keep sight of that. It's been a real boon. If you were bullied in school, if the pacing of the learning didn't work for you, online learning has really opened up a new world for some students. I think it's done the same for some teachers. Some have found that this is really their calling, that they are really effective in this mode. Many feel the exact opposite. And of course, there are many parents out there who are tired of homeschooling or, at least running the administrative side of the school. And I'm processing this mostly through my own network. So I started thinking about it when I saw a tweet from an acquaintance of mine who I know has an educational background. She's a rowing coach that I'm familiar with. And, what I saw Andrea Miller express in her tweet was this profound ambivalence of parents. On one hand, they know sending kids back to school has its dangers. And on the other hand, their kids aren't thriving in the online learning and they want them back. I am very sympathetic. I'm also a parent. On the other hand, there are some really clear and present dangers with having kids in schools, which, for whatever reason, this province has been pretending don't exist. I'll get into those reasons in a minute, but the line really has been that somehow children are not affected, or that transmission isn't happening in schools, or the sort of disinfection theater that has been performed in a lot of schools is adequate to containing the spread. I think there's plenty of evidence at this point that that is not true, that there are pretty high risks associated with putting kids into schools that have not had their ventilation systems upgraded, that allow indoor eating in crowds, that not having universal masking. We don't even have that. There's so many gaps in the way that in-school education is currently conducted. And we're asking not just the students, but the teachers to put themselves at risk because it is politically expedient to do so.
Now, one of the issues that often comes up when we talk about the need for kids back in school is the mental health stuff, and the argument that kids at home are kind of suffering mental health issues for being isolated. And you sent me some interesting research that sort of addresses that. Do you want to set that up?
Yeah, so this is another rowing friend of mine. So as you may, David Fishman, who's kind of become a prominent epidemiologist in these struggles between doctors in the provinces over the province and how to act, he's really been an advocate of we need to look hard at the role that schools are playing in transmission. And a lot of, his reasoning has been absolutely solid, but I really felt with this tweet here, he actually is maybe overcompensating in pushing back against the rhetorical strategy of the province, which has been to say, oh, but the kids are not all right. Their mental health is suffering. We need to send them back. This StatsCan study that was released seemed to indicate that, hey, the kids were not doing as bad as we thought. But as many were quick to point out, there are a lot of things that are questionable about that study. Self-reporting, not necessarily the most accurate index, particularly when you're talking to younger people. That study was also done in the fall. Conditions were pretty different in the fall than they are now. So whether it's an accurate picture of what's going on now with kids is a whole other question. That said, I don't think that this is a reason to send kids back into unsafe schools. And this is really, I think, where the big issues come. We know it's not like there's a mystery. We know what needs to be done to make schools safe, to make kids safe. Why are we not doing it? Because it costs money. And the trend in Ontario for the last few years has been cut costs. Why not have two parallel streams? Why not have the kids who love online learning and the teachers who love online learning and excel at it carrying on with that? That would reduce the number of kids who are in school. We would also have to see some major upgrades in the schools themselves in order to make them safe. But just reducing the volume of kids packed into that school could make a difference. And I think this is where we bump up against something that I've wrestled with my whole life in education, the just inertial pace of change, the reluctance to do anything differently than it's been done before. Obviously, the fact that the money has not been forthcoming is a big part of it, but there's also just an inherent conservatism in education.
Well, and Moopod sort of noted in the chat the glacial pace of change in the educational system. And I think certainly for those of us who've been using technology and seeing the opportunity for distance education, it's been almost a silver lining that it has finally been taken seriously, and they now are looking at distant education in that way. You also sent me this BBC link from Dr. Zoe Hyde. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will talk about. I just want to respond though quickly. I think that what this online learning thing has revealed is that school was never just 100% about learning. If it was, we would be embracing all the advantages of online learning. But because school is actually about a few other things, and that's what I want to wrap with. This is why it hasn't had quite the impact. The Zoe Hyde thing is just it's a great piece of research demonstrating that COVID, contrary to the illusion of the Ontario government, has a devastating effect on children. It's 100% transmissible among young people, and it has really serious long-term effects on the ones that get ill as well. But this is inconvenient information, and that has been the strategy of this government, to sit on anybody who, there's been these high-profile either smear attacks or, in fact, outright firings of some of the doctors who have dared to speak against the sort of the party line on this stuff. So I think the pieces like this Zoe Hyde piece, which is really swimming against the tide in the UK in terms of the pressure there to put kids in school, it's important to get that information out there. So I just kind of want to go to the last bit. I want to return to this question of what is school actually about. And I found a tweet this morning that I thought really kind of summed up what some of the core issues are, which was by a teacher talking about his discovery that he could grade without instilling fear in his students, that he could rethink how he evaluated student work, to not make it a traumatic experience for students. And I think what's unspoken under that is that school is only in part about learning. I would say that's 25% of what it's about. The rest of it is about social conditioning. I mean, in particular, learning to be compliant, learning to just grind it out and do things you don't want to do. Those are all great skills to have in a worker who doesn't question being landed with a 10-hour shift. But also to warehouse kids so that their parents can be the cogs in the great machinery of the economy. And this is, so many things have been laid bare. So many realities about the way our society works have been laid bare by this pandemic. This is a big one. The fact that the pressure to reopen schools has been about relieving parents of parenting so that they can get to work is something I think that doesn't get talked about enough as a factor in all of these debates. And I think there's a moment here to really reconsider what school is about and what school could look like in the future. And certainly that online learning piece is a big part of it. And that's really all I wanted to say.
Right on. Thank you very much, Jeanette. I certainly appreciate you weighing in onto, what is a kind of contentious subject. And part of the reason I asked you to is not just because you have a PhD in medical history, but because you are a mom. And so you do have the kind of moral authority or moral high ground that is often necessary in these types of conversations. So we look forward to having you back talking about issues not just of public health, but of agroecology and all the other many issues that you're interested in. So thank you very much.